Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Room 3 breakouts. We are ready and lined up with the next session. The title of the session is There is no substitute for getting exactly what you want. How we are rapidly and happily digitizing 2,000 paper processes and improving them along the way. In this session, we have two speakers, and so let me introduce them quickly for you. The first one is Jocelyn Brulé. He's the manager of e-collaboration and records management at Pratt Whitney Canada. He has engineering background, worked at Pratt Whitney for many years, and he has more recently been very involved with collaboration and productivity at Pratt Whitney, where he and his team deployed a very robust SharePoint landscape within an export-controlled type of environment. The second speaker is Mike Fitzmaurice, and he is the VP North America at WEBCON. He is the Chief Evangelist and VP of North America with over 25 years in product consulting, evangelism, and engineering and IT management experience in workflow, business process automation, citizen development, and low-code, no-code platforms. He has a very strong background with SharePoint. He actually was at Microsoft working on SharePoint, and so he knows a thing or two about that. And so they will jointly be talking to us about an interesting experience at Pratt Whitney. So it's my pleasure to hand it over to Jocelyn and Mike.
Thank you very much, everybody. So for what it's worth, this is a fireside chat. So the deal is this: I'm going to interview Jocelyn, and we're going to hear all about the story of what Pratt & Whitney has been up to. And yes, WEBCON was involved in the process, but I'd like to think of us as a prop that was used to tell Pratt & Whitney's story. So without any further ado, let's all eyes should be on Jocelyn. Mr. Brulé, can you tell us, actually, you know something, tell us a little bit about Pratt & Whitney. Not every manufacturer is aware of every manufacturer out there. Maybe just 1 minute or so, but
sure.
Tell us about, especially because you just got acquired by Raytheon, right?
Right. Well, it was a merger, in fact, of United Technologies and Raytheon, which became Raytheon Technologies, but the name that people keep seeing is more Raytheon than United Technologies for sure. So I work for Pratt & Whitney, which is, well, we have two divisions. One is the small engines division. So that's the division I'm working on. We operate worldwide, and we support over 50,000 engines that are flying around the world for small aircrafts and helicopters. There's about 10,000 employees. About half of this is in Canada, and 40% in Poland, and the rest of the world covers the last 10%. Pratt & Whitney is a bigger company, about 40,000 employees. The other, let's say, division produces the large engines for the large aircrafts. We are now part of Raytheon, which includes three other divisions: Collins Aerospace, which manufactures aerospace components. There's Raytheon Missiles, which manufactures missiles, and Raytheon Intelligence and Space, which is more into cybersecurity and these kind of space aircraft space, let's say, simulations. So we are now the second biggest A&D company behind Boeing. So it's becoming a big company, this Raytheon / United Technology merger.
Very nice indeed. What's your IT landscape like? You mentioned large presence in Canada, large presence in Poland. United States is no small slouch, and there's smatterings of the organization all over the place. What do you have, and where is it?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty complex environment we deal with all these worldwide presence and the merger and splits that we've been through over the years. The size of the company makes it complex, but also the fact we deal with military work, so we need to operate in a highly secure environment where we deal with ITAR data. And some services are corporate worldwide, like, say, security, network security, but some other are more hybrid, where we have some in Canada, some in the US, some at the corporate headquarters of Raytheon, some at the Pratt Whitney headquarters in the US, some at or headquarters in Canada where I work. So it makes up for a pretty complex LDAP AD environment where we share different services with different people. The human dimension of all this is also pretty fun because we never really know who to talk to for various things, but most of our services are still mainly on site in our headquarters of Pratt & Whitney, small engine divisions. This is in Montreal, in Quebec, Canada. So our SEP, let's say, installation is here on premise, and that's a very big system for us. We use it for most of our operations. We have Innovia also to design our engines. We have Microsoft CRM. We, of course, use the Office suite from Microsoft with SharePoint integration. That's what my team deals with. We and all the collaboration around these tools. My team is about 20 people from 3 companies. We have, of course, Pratt employees. We have also DXC as our support partner for the help desk, but also all the lower level support in my team. Plus, we deal with an Indian company, HCL, for more than 10 years now. They take care of most of the development work we do in various projects. So we support about 10,000 users worldwide. And we've built hundreds of custom small business applications over the years on top of supporting a few terabytes of documents that are stored in different systems that we support.
Okay, you have a lot of irons in the fire. You're doing a lot of things in a lot of places involving a lot of people on a lot of projects. So the thing that I'm concerned with and the thing that I'm curious about is, especially when we met, you had a rather urgent need to develop a lot of custom applications in a relatively short period of time. I'm guessing the pandemic might have had something to do with that, but maybe not exclusive. But what happened? What happened?
Well,
yeah.
Let's say the need was already there before the pandemic to
Okay.
move away from paper-based processes. We had close to 2,000 forms in the company that people mainly filled online, but still had to print to get somebody to sign something, depending on what they were. And now with everybody working from home and we're planning to remain like that for most of the foreseeable future. Even if we go back to the office part-time, we'll still have a lot of our employees that will be working remotely. So getting things signed in this environment is really painful. It was painful before, but now you're home, your work PC is not connected to any printer, so you need to send to yourself home on your home PC email with the thing you have to sign. Then you print it home to sign it, but then you need to scan it home, and maybe you don't have the right material to scan it, so you need to take a picture, send it back to you at work to just send it to the next guy in the queue to approve the next level of that form. So really painful. So people really got fed up with this. We were doing some in the past, but things needed to go much faster now because the need was more urgent, and that's what brought us to new ways of doing things.
Great. What kind of, you've already kind of mentioned that there are a lot of sign-offs and scenarios like that needed to be implemented, but are there other kind of scenarios that mattered a lot? I know that there was some vendor management. There were a number of other things that you were facing. Like, what kinds of applications are we talking about? One of the things I'm trying to figure out is where the application domains were. Was this literally everything going on across the company? Was this stuff that involved the shop floors? Was this stuff that involved heartbeat, like making the organization run processes?
Well, I mean, over the years, we are a kind of an old company. We are more than 80 years old in operation. So we've accumulated a lot of those little bridge processes in the shop or in the offices, mainly in the offices, because that's where people all have a PC. they all have Excel, or they can all create a little form for something and send it to each other by email. So that created a lot of processes over the years, but they typically don't get, let's say, they don't make the cut when it goes to IT, because IT only have big tools to do big projects that are very expensive. So these things stay in the queue and they just accumulate over time. And all these little processes that change all the time, because they are more like checklists or various little pieces of a bigger process. But since they change all the time, people don't, in the business units, they don't want to deal with IT and wait for them to change anything. They want things to be done quick. So most of them remain outside of the DT reality, let's say, for a long while.
I'm assuming you weren't doing everything. Maybe you were doing some things manually beforehand, but you were probably using other things as well. Something spurred you to look for a new approach. Obviously, the fire was lit thanks to the pandemic to get a lot of stuff done much more quickly. But why didn't you use what you already had? What made you start looking around for a different approach?
Well, I guess the fact that the pandemic struck and the need or the pain became higher than before, the motivation to put some money on the table to equip ourselves with a better tool waited on. We did many over the years, many dozens of those workflow type processes with the previous tools we had in we were using, but essentially we had to define the process, which didn't really exist because it was all in the head of the people sending the email to each other.
Okay.
So trying to put this on paper was very painful, because depending who you talk to, the rules seemed different. And then when you send this to a developer, sometimes offshore, by the time it comes back, well, the process has already changed, or the person in charge of the process changed, and the way that person wants the process to work is a bit different. So you kept on changing all the time the code. And the processes, these processes are very volatile in the business units. So they keep changing their process all the time. So with the traditional, more waterfall approach, we were struggling, and we knew if we had to put 1,000 of them out there, we would just die trying to maintain them with the continuous improvement cycles that our business goes over. So we needed something that is 10 times faster and less time, less cost, and easier to change as needed by our customers internally.
And it is kind of scary how much stuff is still produced using waterfall methodologies, especially in low code land, because they kind of assume you're building it, you deploy it, and you're done. And I don't think that's how most applications work, and that's not the message I hear you're saying when you talk about continuous improvement. Well, you found WEBCON. How did that happen?
Well, that's interesting because, like I mentioned, we have about 40% of our employees that are in Poland. So a few years back, when we could travel, I was in Poland to visit our facilities over there and talk with my counterpart in Poland. And we had a dinner together during that visit. And I remember he talked to me about a product he loved so much, and I had rarely seen people so passionate about a product in IT. So I had that in the back of my mind, but we weren't looking at the time for such a tool. But when the pandemic hit, we said, well, let's go back to this special tool that Martin talked to us about. Martin is my colleague over there, and so we dug a little more, and we found out that probably this WEBCON tool would help us quite a bit, because they had built over 100 applications over there with a part-time DT person, and that's not the kind of ratio we normally have with the way we proceeded here. So we gave it a try, and we started working with your team in the cloud with a sandbox installation just to learn a little more about it, and then we proceeded based on the number of forms or processes we wanted to digitize, the payback was quite fast because it allowed us to cut the cost of each project by probably a factor of about 10. We're about there. It took us a few months to digest the learning curve, let's say, but still things are much faster. And also, we typically will redo the application 3-4 times before we deploy it, because the user, they keep on changing their mind as usual, except now we can change things within a few days instead of a few months when we have to fix or change things.
I mean, obviously, I'm pleased you used our software for it, but I'm actually more interested in what you didn't do, at least to some extent. Like, for example, you're an SAP shop. You've got a WMS, you've got a PLM, you've got a CRM system. Why didn't you just use those platforms to build the kinds of things you're talking about?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because unfortunately, that's the normal reflex of most people, because they say, well, let's say you've got, I don't know, like you've mentioned, we worked a lot with our supplier creation process, or supplier master data management processes. And this used to be about 20 little forms in the company, because each department has a piece of the pie, let's say, with a supplier, whether it's accounts payable, receivable, taxation, shipping, procurement, whatnot. Each of those departments had created their own form internally without talking to each other. So the poor user had to fill the same form many times, because they had a few fields that would be different. People would have liked to do all of this in SAP, but these things change so often. They add, remove, change some of the fields, and it's different in each country, and they have different things going on, different approvals based on the amount or the type of supplier and whatnot. So that building all of this in SAP would have been very, very expensive. And it's something that comes back very often. Let's say the workflow engines in various large platforms are not necessarily that sophisticated. Where when we look at the toolbox in WEBCON, it's really suited for that type of scenario, and it comes with built-in dashboards as well, which our users always love, because they get a better feel for where there are delays in their processes, and they can put reminder with the checkbox. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done much faster than before, just by configuring the system, because there's a lot of the business needs that are built into the framework. So that made our life much easier.
Well, thank you. There's another thing you could have done, because I recall at one point when I was actually talking to a couple of different people from another client early on in the relationship, and one of them said, well, can you model out an expense reporting system for us? They just wanted to see a prototype for it. And I said, sure, yeah. And I started doing it. And the other guy spoke up for a second, is why wouldn't you just use Expensify or Concur or some other off-the-shelf canned software package to solve this? You could have used any of a number of like scenario specific solutions that are available with a credit card, but you didn't. And what was your reasoning there?
Yeah, well, it's a bit like the traditional reflexes that you may want to build something in SAP, or build something on Innovia, or buy something that's already pre-built for you. Sometimes it works. It's not impossible. And now with all the cloud environments that are available, sometimes it's fast. But in companies like mine, where we have a lot of security that needs to be dealt with, when you look at the total cost of ownership and deployment of a product, it's not always that trivial, because again, we have a large size, so we need to buy a lot of licenses. And most of those licenses, even if you don't really use them, you end up paying for all the seats that you need. Right. And integrating those cloud environments with the military security is not always trivial.
Of course.
And on top of all this, in an aerospace company, your processes are certified and approved by authorities. So you cannot just change all your processes without sometimes going back to these authorities for recertification or approval. So when you buy a commercial package, you need to adapt your processes to the packages, where when you build it yourself, then you can keep the same process or adapt the custom application to your process. And it makes change management much easier, because again, if you have 5,000 employees to train, sometimes it's painful if the processes change too much. So again, if you had to code everything, it's risky, it's painful, it takes a lot of time. You need these skills. Most of the time, they're not available. So people try other things. But when you have the option of building something in a few days without the need for, let's say, a 10 years of experience, 10-year experienced developer, you can, that's a new option that people may find interesting.
Yeah, you bring up something very useful there. Who's doing the developing? If it's not a developer with 10 years of experience, are we talking about like end user citizen development or what?
Well, that's another trend. I guess we hear a lot, this citizen developer. But between the experienced, highly reliable developer that works probably in a big company like Google or Apple, it's hard to get those developers to participate or to remain in some of our manufacturing companies. But now what we're talking about with the product like low code product like WEBCON is not the citizen developer that overnight becomes an expert at building business processes and optimizing business processes. It's not the hardcore developer. It's somewhere in between, somebody that has some IT skills and IT understanding, a few years of experience, maybe, or a few months of training on the platform. But it's often what we find works best are people that understand business processes and can understand the tool. And learning a tool like WEBCON is not years of learning. If you've already been exposed to similar tools, you can work your way through this in a few weeks or a few months, then become productive at it. So you get to deliver high quality solutions without a team of 10 experienced people or hiring very expensive contractors. You can be somewhere in the middle. You don't end up with a mess created by an amateur, let's say. And when you try to scale the application, everything falls apart because now it doesn't work anymore. But you get the benefits at the same time.
Got it. So low code aimed at professionals as opposed to low code aimed at amateurs is, I hear you saying you're a fan of that approach.
Yeah, you get to the throughput is much higher than coding, but the quality remains what it should be. Where when you hand the keys over to the business, becomes unsupportable after a few years. It's not just like the one of, maybe you'll have some exceptions in the business that in the business units that you were lucky you hired somebody that worked in an IT company before or as an IT professional before, and they can come up with good solutions. But generally speaking, if you can multiply by 10 the capacity of your DT team with a tool that facilitates their deployments, then everybody gains.
Great. What kind of solutions do you have in the works? Either already out or in development or planned or so on? What are you using WEBCON for these days?
Well, we've got a few, of course, many requests that were prioritized based on the current pandemic situation. So for example, right now we're preparing return to office. So our company wanted an application to reserve desks. So we've built a little application that shows the various diagrams of our floors, and people can see the desk numbers, and they can pick a date and a desk number, and the system records all the reservations and then sends them an email, and you can see who's booked which desk around your area. We've built we call a material pass authorization. So when people went back to office to grab a screen or a keyboard or a mouse, our company wanted to know where all the material was going. So we built a little application to allow them to fill online and have this routed to their supervisor and recorded by or inventory department, let's say, to know who had what. We've built, like we discussed, one to manage supplier data, which was very painful before with all these handwritten forms. So we've got about a dozen of those in process right now, and we've completed about 20 so far in the past few months. So it's going much faster than before.
Very nice. In general, just overall information, overall environment, overall information environment, corporate culture, or what have you. How are things different now compared to the way they were? Do you notice a difference?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's both sides. I mean, both in my team, people are quite happy because they get their customer, or we get our internal customer excited, where before they would know dealing with DT was a bit of a pain and it would take a lot of time. Now, sometimes we meet the people in the morning, and in the afternoon, we get back to them with a prototype, because we can build on top of prototype. So we just change we have a few templates for our application. So we just copy the template, change a few things, and push it back to them. It's multilingual. It's live. It's on a web interface, available on their phone within the same day. So they are very a bit, let's say, surprised by the speed at which we come up with this. And then after a few meetings with them, where we show them the application, what it looks like, it's much easier to get their feedback and to understand what they had in mind, because now it's not just whiteboarding or trying to write in text what you want to see on the screen. You get the screen, we can move things around for them, and we repush the solution, and we can iterate a few times like that within a week or two, and we end up with the almost finished product in no time. So people are quite happy. So it brings some joy to the team, I guess, because our customers are really happy with how we deal with their request.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
At the risk of I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it occurs to me, especially because we're nearing the end of our half hour. Certainly, yes, if the audience knows about WEBCON, great. If that's good, but this is not meant to be an advertisement for our company or our products or something like that. I absolutely think, however, what we're selling is an idea, and that idea is there's some things you have to do yourself. And if you adopt the right tools, there are reasons why some approaches that you could take don't work as well as you might think they do. And if you find the right tool set, you can make it work. I would like to think that what makes WEBCON work is the focus on being able to deliver things rapidly and change them rapidly and manage them rapidly and effectively once they're out of the gate. It doesn't have to be us. I like to think we're good at that, but look, find any vendor you like that offers those things. But the typical vendors that say, oh, well, any amateur can make something in a matter of a couple of days, that's probably not going to result in a good time at the enterprise level. No. Am I kind of on track with what you guys have come to believe, or am I a little bit off? I want to make sure we aren't only talking about WEBCON, but we're talking about what WEBCON and Pratt & Whitney care about in common.
Oh, I guess it's a trend in the industry. I mean, if we go back years ago, it was a mainframe and nobody could touch what was happening on the mainframe, more or less. Then everything became decentralized with Excel macros and whatnot. Right. And now it's somewhere in between, where It's not like full-blown SAP or mainframe and whatnot, and it's not fully decentralized, free-for-all like Excel. You still want some rigor, but you want to keep the rigor of a mainframe, let's say, or an SAP, but you want the speed of an Excel or a VB that can be built by pretty much anybody with some skills. So now you have the best of both worlds, and you can get much more out for your money than either of the two traditional approaches.
Great. Well, I think, Lubor, do we have any questions queued up from the audience?
No, we don't see any questions right now, and we are pretty much at the bottom
Oh,
of the hour.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just conclude by saying thank you to Mike and Jocelyn. It was a very interesting discussion. As somebody who has spent several years in the process automation industry, it very much resonated with me. It was very interesting to hear how you went about it. And I just have a brief announcement for the audience. So it's lunchtime again. And you should take the time, obviously, to grab some food, but also take advantage of the networking hour. You can visit the virtual trade show. You can participate in the conversations. You can initiate a topic or join a discussion, introduce yourself, whatever you please. And then the agenda will resume at 1:30 p.m. in the virtual room 1 with the keynote. So thank you very much for now, and see you soon.